you guys are staying safe in this time of quarantine. We are currently not meeting at church and putting a pause on our Star Wars series so everybody can stay safe and healthy. We are, however, going to be doing a series of short stories in the Bible. Today, our topic is going to be giants. Now, we're going to be talking about giants in two different ways. We're going to be talking about the real living giants. Now, when we think of real living giants, we usually think about Goliath, right? Like he's the only giant. But actually, there were several giants in the Bible. In fact, we're going to be talking about a couple of them today. Um, Now, well, again, when we think of giants, we usually think of David and Goliath, right? That they were the only ones. Or we usually think about fairy tales, that they were beings that weren't real or made up. But giants were real beings, and they're described in the Bible as people who were usually between about 8 to 12 feet. Biggest one being 12 feet. One of them, that one we're actually going to talk about today. So let's dive into it. Now, the people of Israel, just to set the stage for you, were just delivered from the promised land, Egypt, and were promised land by God full of milk and honey. Now, when I talk about milk and honey, we're talking about wealth. And when we talk about wealth in our terms, we think immediately we think of money. But back then, usually your wealth was sustained through what you had, like whether it was livestock or crops. They did have money, physical money, but usually your wealth was tied up in cattle and sheep and all that other stuff. And so Moses, he decided he was going to send out 12 spies to spy on the neighboring country that they were about to go into, the land that God had promised them. And when they went to this land, they discovered giants. Now, these giants were probably, from what we can tell, about 8 to 10 feet. Think of like a basketball goal. You've seen a basketball goal and how high that thing is. Now imagine somebody who was that tall. Not only that, but they were strong and carried big axes and spears. Now I don't know about you. Now I would be a little afraid. I'd be a little afraid of these people too. But when I see them, um, they were afraid. In fact, the 12 spies, they return to the people and they tell them like there are giants out there. Sure, God might be with us, but these people are scary. Their walls are like almost to the sky. Like we don't stand a chance. There's no way we're going to be able to defeat these people. Even with God on our side, I don't think we stand a chance. But there was two spies in the group. One's name was Joshua, and the other's name was Caleb. And Caleb and Joshua, they're like, guys, God has came through time and time again for us. He delivered us from like one of the most mighty empires out there. Why are we gonna be afraid? God's got our back. He hasn't let us down yet. He made us a promise that we were gonna go into the promised land, right? That he would give us this land. Why are we worried about how big they are, how strong they are? We got God on our side. He's bigger and stronger than anything that we can stand against. But see, the people, they were afraid. They didn't want to go into battle against these giants. They didn't have any military experience, so they figured, whoa, we can't do it. Um, we don't want to fight these people. So God's like, well, fine. Um, he gives us the freedom to choose, right? Even even when we're not following his plan, like we talked about in Sunday school, he's still going to give us the freedom to choose. So God didn't make them go to battle against the giants. In fact, they wandered in the wilderness for about 40 years. And after those 40 years, the people who didn't believe, they had all grown old and died off at this point. And so the new generation, they had more faith than their parents did in that God would deliver the enemy into their hands. And so Joshua and Moses, they gathered up the people, and they all took up arms and went against a big giant in his army. His name was Shion. Now Shion was the ruler of the land that God had promised them, and Shion wasn't going to let the people of Israel in his land. He didn't even want Israel because Moses, he had sent out several messengers, and they asked if they could just pass by peacefully. But Shion wouldn't hear anything of it. He wanted the people of Israel dead. He didn't. They were. It says in the Bible that they were very wicked people, and they wanted the people of Israel dead because of the God that they served. So, the people of Israel, they gathered up their arms and fearlessly marched up to the city, knowing that God would deliver them from the enemy no matter how strong. Now, does that mean they weren't afraid? Of course they were afraid. They have no military experience. They're going against an army of giants, right? But they trusted that God would come through no matter what their fear was, right? So they marched and they met Sheol and his armies in battle. Now, after a long battle, Sheol and his army fell to the Israelites. Now, as this picture shows, like they had armor, they had swords, they had a bigger army, but the people of Israel were able to defeat them, not through their own power and their own strength, but through God's power and God's strength. But the battle wasn't over. The people of Israel, they had another army to face, because there was another king, and he was two times more strong, had 2 times the army that Sheol had, and had 2 times the reputation that Sheol had. He was known for being vicious and angry and wicked and strong, and he had a massive army. But here's the thing, the people of Israel, they weren't afraid, because they knew that God would come through for them. And this king's name was Og. Now Og, he was what was known as a Rephaim. Now Rephaim, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but that's fine. Rephaim was somebody who he was a giant, for one. He was one of the fiercest warriors known throughout that land. 2, 3, he was somebody who didn't show any mercy. So he didn't. Even his own people feared him and would bring him. All these they feared King Og, right? And so the people of Israel. Oh yeah, one more thing. Og was also 12 feet. Now, we talked about a basketball goal earlier for the other guy, right? Like that's still pretty big, right? But this guy was even bigger. This guy could probably touch. This guy could probably touch the roof of your house, because this guy was like 12 feet. This guy was huge. Now, I don't know about you, but this guy had the bigger army. He was super huge. So was his army. He had more military experience. He was known for being the fiercest warrior throughout all the land. But here's the thing: the people of Israel weren't afraid. Not because, they probably were a little afraid, but they knew that God would come through in the battle just like last time. And so, here's the thing: the guy had all this strength and all this army, but he didn't have the one thing that Israel had that made them stronger, and that was God. So, Israel, they marched forward fearlessly into battle against King Og, and they were able to take him down. They were able to claim the land that God had promised them. And this didn't stop there. God spread fear throughout the rest of the land, and so people were too afraid to fight Israel, to the point that some of them would even just surrender as Israel would come through, because they were too afraid of not Israel but their God, because they knew that their God would come through, and that was their real strength, right? Was their God. And so Israel went through, and they were able to take the promised land that God had given to them, because God keeps his promises to us, right? If God makes a promise to us, he's going to keep it. Now, there are times in our life where we come and face our giants, right? Whether that's something in school, or rather that's anything that we're afraid of, or anything that we might, anything that we might not. Oh, that guy's sorry. Whether that's, at school, or whether that's something in our life that we're afraid of, right? We don't have to be afraid. Now, we might not literally face a giant that coming at us with an axe or an entire army, but here's the thing: in our life, there are going to be things that we're afraid of that we don't want to do. But you know what? God's always going to be there to help see us through, and the promises that he makes to us, if we just follow his plan for our life, he's going to be able to show up in mighty ways. Now, there have been times when I've been afraid or I've doubted that God is even going to come through, but He's shown me time and time again that He is stronger than anything that we might face. Um, we're now wrapping up there. Hope to see you guys next week as we do another video. Hopefully I'll be a little more prepared next time, since I have more of a heads up now. Hope you guys again stay healthy and safe. And again, if you're afraid about this coronavirus or afraid about what might happen, just remember that we have a God who is 10 times more stronger than anything we might come against. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a wonderful week and hope again to see you next week.